about by other peoples. Jos 2. 9-11. 9. 9. Once a 4. 8. 6. 6 also, these plagues prove that the gods of Egypt were powerless. X 12. 12. New 33. 4. See gods and goddesses, the 10 plagues. Moses before Pharaoh of Egypt. The plagues gr. Gaia, literally, blows or strokes mentioned in the book of Revelation evidently are expressions of God's anger and symbolically point to the result or effect of his judicial decisions. Re 9. 18, 20. 11. 6. 15. 1, 6, 8. 16. 9, 21. 18. 4, 8. 21. 9. 22. 18. Plain. Relatively level land, in contrast to hilly or mountainous country. The Hebrew scriptures are quite explicit in their use of different words to identify or describe various types of land. The Hebrew term ara is used both as a name for a specific area and as a word descriptive of a certain type of land. See Araba. When used without the definite article, ara indicates a desert plain or steppe, such as those of Moab and Jericho. New 22. 1. 35. 1. Jos 5. 10. 13. 32. Jo 52. 8. Though there might be rivers to provide some water for the area, ara generally emphasizes that the plain is an arid one. Thus it would be quite a reversal for the fertile, watered plain of Shroud to become like the desert plain Issa 33. 9, or for torrents of water to come to the desert plain. Issa 35. 1, 6. 51. 3. The word bik indicated a wide plain bounded by mountains. It comes from a verb meaning split and can be accurately rendered valley plain. Even today the broad valley plain between the Lebanon range and the Lebanon mountains is known as the Bekaa. Jos 11. 17. Often in the scriptures bik or valley plain, is set in contrast to mountains or hills. 8. 7. 11. 11. PS 104. 8. Issa 41. 18. Or rugged or rough ground. Issa 40. 4. The related Aramaic word appearing at Daniel 3. 1 is frequently translated just plain, referring to the place when Nebuchadnezzar erected the gold image. A long low plain, or valley, was designated in Hebrew Emek. The word signifies a long broad sweep between parallel ranges of hills of less extent than the preceding term bik Emek having the idea of lowness and breadth rather than precipitateness or confinement. M. Plinfik and Strong's Cyclopedia, 1881, Volume X, p. 703. The Hebrew word is applied to many different localities, such as the low plain of Acre, the low plain of Ajalon, and the low plain of Rephaim. Jos 7. 24. 10. 12. 1 ch 11. 15. O textoi acute miritra longo, plaster 648 plaster. A coating for walls and partitions that was commonly made of clay mixed with straw. At times the mixture included lime, ashes, pulverized pottery fragments, or pounded shells or limestone. But 14. 42. S13. 10-16. Da 5. 5. See mortar, 2. Pledge. An object of personal property, such as a ring or garment, surrendered by a debtor to his creditor as a guarantee of the future repayment of a loan. The regulations of the Mosaic law concerning pledges protected the interests of impoverished and defenseless members of the nation. They showed that God appreciated the difficulties of the poor and widows. The two Hebrew verbs char vol and a vad, and their related nouns, have to do with a pledge. If a poor man gave his outer garment as a pledge, a security on a loan, the creditor was not to keep it overnight. X 22. 26, 27. De 24. 12. 13. A poor person would likely use his outer garment for covering at night. If he were deprived of it, he might suffer from the cold. For a person to ignore this law would mark him as greedy and heartless. Job 22. 6. 24. 9. Yet, during Israel's apostasy, some persons not only seized garments from the poor as pledges, but used them during their idolatrous feasts. And 2. 8. Not returning a pledged thing was listed in Ezekiel 18. 10-13 along with robbing and shedding blood as things combining to prove an unrepentant sinner worthy of death. On the other hand, a wicked man who abandoned his sins by, among other things, returning the very thing pledged would positively keep living. S 33. 14-16 It was also forbidden to take a hand mill or its upper grindstone as a pledge, for bread was usually baked daily, and to take the implements necessary for grinding the grain would mean seizing a soul, or life. De 24. 6. Widows were especially protected, since often they would not have anyone to defend or assist them. The law forbade seizing a widow's garment as a pledge at all. De 24. 17. Compare Job 24. 3. Also, one could not enter a man's house to take a pledged item from him. The debtor was to bring the pledge out to his creditor. De 24. 10. 11 In this way the inviolability of the man's home was upheld, and he could maintain self-respect, which would hardly be so if his creditor felt at liberty to enter the man's home without invitation. Thus, in addition to compassion and generosity to 15. 8. The laws about pledges encouraged respect for the person and rights of others. Illustrative use. Deuteronomy 15. 6 gave as a sign of God's blessing the fact that the Jews would have sufficient means to lend on pledge to many nations. If a person despised the word, by failing to repay a loan, he would forfeit what he put up as a pledge. In like manner a person would experience loss if he failed to obey God's commandment. PR 13. 13. In the Hebrew scriptures advice is repeatedly given against going surety for a stranger, thereby promising to pay that person's debt if he failed to do so. PR 11. 15. 22. 26, 27. See surety. Thus, Proverbs 20. 16 speaks of taking the garment of the one going surety for a stranger. This is in direct contrast to the sympathetic consideration to be shown the poor man who is obliged to become debtor to another because of his own misfortune. The one going surety for a stranger is not simply unfortunate but is stupid. The proverb evidently says to let him suffer the consequences. The latter part of the verse calls for seizing a pledge in the instance of a foreign woman. The man entering into relationship with such a woman may become impoverished. Compare PR 5. 3, 8-10, and so he may have to pledge his remaining possessions as security for his debts. The proverb apparently says that he merits no pity, inasmuch as he acted contrary to all sound advice in having dealings with the foreign woman. Plow. See farming implements. Plowing. Conclusions as to the type of plow used by Hebrew farmers. O textoi acute miritra longo. Plummet 649 plowing time, though, Israelite farmers were to keep the Sabbath. X 34. 21. A bull and an ass were not to be yoked to the same plow, doubtless because of the inequality of their strength and pace. De 22. 10 Often a pair of cattle pulled the plow. Lu 14. 19. Job 1. 14 A number of men, each with a pair, or span, of cattle, might work together, plowing parallel rows one behind the other. In Elisha's case, as related at 1 Kings 19. 19, he was the 12th and last, so he could stop without disrupting others following him. He left the field and used his wood plowing instruments as firewood in offering the bulls as a sacrifice. 1 Kai 19. 21 In the Land and the Book revised by J. Grand, 1910, p. 121, W. M. Thompson reports that one man could easily sow the area plowed by a group of men. Illustrative use. The familiar work of plowing often was used as the basis for an illustration. When Philistines convinced Samson's wife to obtain from him the answer to his riddle, Samson said they had plowed with his young cow, that is, used for their service one who should have been serving him. JG 14. 15-18 A rocky crag is no place for ploughing, and as Amos shows, it was equally irrational for Israel's leaders to corrupt justice and practice unrighteousness and yet expect to derive benefit from such a course. Am 6. 12, 13 Hosea 10. 11 Evidently uses ploughing a much harder work for a heifer than threshing was to represent laborious or slavish labor, likely imposed by foreign oppressors, that was due to common apostate Judah. What Judah and Israel needed, according to Jeremiah 4. 3, 4 and Hosea 10. 12, 13, was a change in their way of life, preparing, softening, and cleansing their hearts. Compare Lu 8. 5-15 is by ploughing and removing thorns, so that, instead of wasting their efforts and labor in wrong practices that bring only a bad harvest, they might instead reap divine blessings. The description of the orderly, purposeful, and judicious methods of the farmer in ploughing, harrowing, sowing, and threshing are used at Isaiah 28. 23-29 to illustrate the ways of Jehovah, who is wonderful in counsel, who has done greatly in effectual working. Even as ploughing and harrowing are limited, being merely preparatory to sowing, so, too, Jehovah does not forever discipline or punish his people, but he disciplines primarily to soften them and make them amenable to receiving his counsel and guidance, which produce blessings. Compare Heb 12. 4-11. Even as the hardness of the soil governs the extent or intensity of the ploughing, so the type of grain determines the force and weight of the instruments used for threshing to eliminate the chaff, all of this illustrating God's wisdom in cleansing his people and getting rid of whatever is undesirable, varying his treatment according to existing needs and circumstances. Compare Is 21. 10. 1. 25. A city plowed up as a mere fooled meant a city completely overturned and laid waste. J 26. 18. Mic 3. 12 Israel's speaking of those who had plowed upon my very back, lengthening their furrows, evidently describes the nation's sufferings under its many enemies who relentlessly and cruelly overran and mistreated them, as Israel made its back just like the earth. For those crossing over. PS 129. 1-3. ISFA 51. 23. Compare PS 66. 12. In the restoration prophecy at Amos 9. 13-15, Jehovah's blessing is shown to make the soil so productive that the harvest is still going on when the time comes to plow for the next season. Compare La 26. 5. Even as Jesus had said that his disciples should accept food, drink, and lodging from those they served, since the worker is worthy of his wages, so the Apostle Paul upheld the right of those laboring in Christian ministry to receive material support from others, just as the man who plows does so with the legitimate hope of being a partaker of the harvest to which his labor contributed. Yet Paul personally and o textoi acute miritra longo, pokereth hazabame 650 bob, or plummet. Carpenters, masons, and other craftsmen of ancient times used the plummet. In connection with the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, Zerubbabel is represented as having in hand a plummet, literally, the stone or weight, the tin, according to the Masoretic text. Zech 4. 9, 10 as foretold, not only was the temple's foundation laid by Zerubbabel, but under his supervision the work was carried to completion. S 3. 8-10. 6. 14, 15. In vision, Amos beheld Jehovah stationed on a wall made with a plummet, and thus one that was originally straight, perpendicular. Jehovah was seen holding a plummet, and the prophet was told that God was setting a plummet in the midst of his people. As Israel did not meet the test of straightness in a spiritual way, not acting in accord with God's requirements, Jehovah would mete out justice and no more do any further excusing of it. Israel's high places would be laid desolate, her sanctuaries would be devastated, and God would rise up against the house of Jeroboam with a sword. Am 7. 7-9 True to these words, Israel was devastated and Samaria destroyed by the Assyrians in 740 BCE. Pokereth Hazabam Poche Middle.Rethas Middle.Zedi Middle.Baim. Head of a family whose descendants were among the sons of the servants of Solomon returning from the exile under the leadership of Zerubbabel. As 2. 1, 2, 55, 57. NE 7. 59. Poison. Sea venom. Poisonous plant. While some have suggested equating the Hebrew word roush with hemlock, colocynth, or the poppy, no certain identification of the plant is possible. The Hebrew term at times refers to one bitter and poisonous plant La 3. 5, 19, 2 poison or venom to 32. 33. Job 20. 16, and 3 when used in connection with water, poisonous water durate. 14. 9. 15. 23. 15. It appears in an illustrative sense with reference to the version of Justice Ho 10. 4. Am 6. 12 and to those who apostatize. De 29. 18. Comprecate. 23. Hob 12. 15. Concerning the Messiah, it was foretold that he would be given a poisonous plant for food. PS 69. 21 This occurred when Jesus Christ, before his impalement, was offered wine mixed with gall but, upon tasting it, refused the stupefying drink that was probably intended to alleviate his sufferings. In recording the fulfillment of this prophecy, Matthew 27. 34 employed a Greek word komidal.legall, the same term found in the Greek Septuagint at Psalm 69. 21. However, Mark's Gospel account mentions myrmista 15. 23, and this has given rise to the view that in this case the poisonous plant or gall was myrrh. Another possibility is that the drugged drink contained both gall and myrrh. Polygamy. See marriage. Pomegranate heb. Rim-middle.mon. A fruit that, when ripe, is of a maroon color, shaped like an apple, with a rosette or crown extending around the bottom. Within the hard rind it is crowded with small capsules full of juice, each containing a small pink or red seed. The pomegranate tree Punica granatum, also denoted by the Hebrew word rim-middle.mon, grows throughout the Middle East. It seldom passes 4.5 meters, 15 feet in height. The spreading branches are numerous and of dark green leaves that are shaped like the head of a lance and that produce blossoms with coral red to scarlet flowers. Picture, Volume 1, p. 742. Pomegranate juice makes a refreshing drink. 8. 2. A syrup called grenadine is produced from the seeds, and the blossoms are used in the preparation of an astringent medicine used as a remedy for dysentery. The Shulamite maiden's veiled temples were compared to a segment of pomegranate and her skin to a paradise of pomegranates. K4. 3, 13. 6. 7. By means of Moses, Jehovah promised the nation of Israel that he would bring them into a land of wheat, barley, vines, figs, pomegranates, olives, and honey. 8. 7-9 Prior to this the spies who went into the land had returned with grapes, figs, and otextoi acute muritra longo, Paul of the Canal 651 Pontius. See Pilate. Pontius Pontus C. A district of northern Asia Minor along the Euxine Sea Black Sea. The name evidently was applied in pre-Christian times to that part of northern Asia Minor bordering Pontus Exinus, as the sea was sometimes called. Pontus ran from the lower course of the Halys River on the W near Bithynia eastward along the coast toward this limit of the sea. Along the fertile coastline the climate is warm in the summer and mild in the winter. The interior forms the any corner of the central plateau, broken by many river valleys, and in these grain was grown. The mountain slopes were forested and produced timber for shipbuilding. Along the coast the influence of Greek colonies was felt, but the people of the interior had close ties to Armenia to the after being under Persian influence for a time. The separate kingdom of Pontus was set up in the 4th century BCE. There was a succession of kings called Mithridates, and close ties with Rome developed. However, Mithridates Sixapater challenged Roman power and expanded his kingdom greatly. After a series of wars, the Romans under Pompey defeated him about 66 BCE. Much of Pontus was then united with Bithynia to the W into a combined province called Bithynia and Pontus. But the eastern section was added to the province of Galatia Galatian Pontus. Later, some of this eastern part was given to Polemon c. 36 BCE to form part of the kingdom of Polemon. Map, Volume 1, p. 195. Thus in the 1st century CE the term Pontus referred either to the entire geographic area along the coast, or to that part found in the combined province of Bithynia and Pontus, or even to the eastern section that had become part of Galatia and the kingdom of Ptolemon. The 1st century Jewish writer Philo said that Jews had spread to every part of Pontus. Jews from Pontus were present in Jerusalem on Pentecost 33 CE Act 2. 9. Possibly some of these Jews of Pontus who heard Peter's speech became Christians and returned to their home territory. Some 30 years later, Peter addressed his first canonical letter c. 62-64 CE to temporary residents scattered about in Pontus and other parts of Asia Minor. 1 P 1. 1. Since he mentioned older men who were to shepherd the flock, Christian congregations likely existed in Pontus. 1 P 5. 1. 2. The Jew named Aquila, who was a native of Pontus, travelled to Rome and then to Corinth, where he met the Apostle Paul. Act 18. 1. 2. Pool. A large open reservoir for collecting and storing water. Artificial pools were dug out of the soil or hewn out of rock. At times they were located inside the cities and linked to springs by means of conduits. This ensured the inhabitants a supply of water even in time of siege. Some pools were enlargements or adaptations of such existing natural features as caves. Among the various pools mentioned in the scriptures are those of Gibeon 2:2. 13. See Gibeon, Gibeonites, Hebron 2:4. 12. Heshbon 7. 4. See Bath Rabbim, Samaria 1:22. 38, and Jerusalem. It has been suggested that the pools made by the congregator King Solomon for irrigation purposes are perhaps to be identified with reservoirs found east of Bethlehem. EC 2. 6. Water from nearby springs was stored in these reservoirs. Pools of Jerusalem. The approximate location of King Hezekiah's pool adjoining the conduit that he constructed to bring the waters of the spring of Gihon into Jerusalem is the pool of Siloam, the present Birkat Silwan, just of the city of David. 2 Chi 20. 20. 2 Ch 32. 30. The 1st century pool of Siloam Jo 9. 7 seems to have been found nearby, some 100 meters 330 feet SSE of Birkat Silwan. The biblical references to the old pool Issa 22. 11. Upper pool 2 Chi 18. 17. Issa 7. 3. 36. 2, and Lower pool Issa 22. 9 give no indication about their exact position in relation to the city of Jerusalem. Scholars generally believe that O textoi acute muritra longo, por 652 meaning sender and applying to a canal, or channel, that delivers water to a pool. Issa 8. 6 Thus, while some Bible versions leave Sheol untranslated, the Jerusalem Bible renders the expression the conduit cistern, and the New World Translation reads the pool of the canal. Remains have been found of a channel, or canal, that ran east from the Gihon spring, following the contour of the Kidron's bank and terminating in an ancient reservoir now called Birkat el Hamra. Sections of the canal were covered with stone slabs, but it appears that there were openings so that water could be drawn off to irrigate parts of the valley. The gradual slope of this canal may be referred to in the words the waters of the Shiloh that are going gently. Issa 8. 6th location of Birkat el Hamra fits Nehemiah's placement of the pool of the canal, near the king's garden and the stairway going down from the east end of the city of David. Poor. Lacking material possessions or the necessities of life. At times, inferior in quality. Also, pitiable because of spiritual deficiency. The problem of poverty is an ancient one. Down through the centuries the needy generally have outnumbered those having much. When accepting an act of generosity, Jesus recognized the hard fact that poverty would persist among humans living in imperfection, saying to his disciples, "For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want you can always do them good, but me you do not have always." Mr. 14. 7. The Bible presents a balanced view of the problem, expressing compassion for those suffering under oppressive conditions, while also reproving those who, in effect, eat their own flesh because of indolence. EC 4. 1, 5. PR 6. 6-11 It stresses spiritual prosperity over material prosperity 1 T6. 17-19. Hence, the apostle wrote, "For we have brought nothing into the world, and neither can we carry anything out. So, having sustenance and covering, we shall be content with these things." 1 7, 8 But the scriptures do not portray material poverty as a virtue in itself, and they warn of the temptation to steal, which extreme poverty may bring. PR 6. 30, 31. 30. 8, 9. Contrast F4. 28. The poor in Israel. It was not Jehovah's purpose that any of the Israelites suffer poverty. The nation was given an inheritance of land. New 34. 2-12 All Israelite families, with the exception of the Levites, who received 1/10 of the produce of the land for their service at the sanctuary, shared in that inheritance and therefore had a means of supporting themselves. New 18. 20, 21 Land holdings were secure. Laws of inheritance ensured that the land would continue to be held by the family or tribe to which it belonged. New 27. 7-11. 36. 6-9. The 21. 15-17. See inheritance. It could not be sold in perpetuity. The 25. 23 In the Jubilee year all hereditary lands that had been sold were restored to their rightful owners. The 25. 13 Thus even if a man squandered his substance, the inheritance could not be forever lost to his posterity. Faithful adherence to God's law would largely have prevented poverty among the Israelites. The 15. 4, 5 However, if disobedient, they would not have Jehovah's blessing, and this would lead to impoverishment due to such calamities as invasions by enemy armies and severe drought. The 28. 22-25. Compare JG 6. 1-6. 1 Chi 17. 1. 18. 17, 18. Just 5. 17, 18. Individuals, because of being lazy PR 6. 10, 11. 10. 4. 19. 15. 20. 13. 24. 30-34, drunkards, gluttons PR 23. 21, or pleasure seekers PR 21. 17, could bring poverty on themselves and their families. Then, too, unforeseen circumstances might arise that could plunge persons into poverty. Death could leave behind orphans and widows. Accidents and sickness could temporarily or permanently hinder a person from performing necessary work. For these reasons Jehovah could say to Israel, "Someone poor will never cease to be in the midst of the land." O text to acute miritra longo, poplars, Torrent Valley of 653 Pharisees, were more concerned about tradition than instilling genuine love of neighbor and proper regard for aged and needy parents. Mount 15. 5, 6. 23. 23. Compare Lu 10. 29-32. The money-loving Pharisees had little interest in those who were poor. Lu 16. 14. Christ Jesus, though, felt pity for the crowds, because they were skinned and thrown about like sheep without a shepherd. Mount 9. 36 His declaring the good news to the poor and oppressed stood in such marked contrast with the attitude of the religious leaders of Judaism that it constituted one of the proofs that he was indeed the Messiah. Mount 11. 5. Lu 4. 18. 7. 22 To responsive ones it also opened up the glorious privilege of inheriting the heavenly kingdom. Mount 5. 3. Lu 6. 20. Being in a covenant relationship with God, the Jews were under obligation to assist needy fellow Israelites. PR 14. 21. 28. 27. Isra 58. 6, 7. As 18. 7-9 Appreciating this, Zacchaeus, upon accepting Jesus as the Messiah, exclaimed, "Look! The half of my belongings, Lord, I am giving to the poor." Lu 19. 8 For the same reason, Christ Jesus could say, "When you spread a feast, invite poor people, crippled, lame, blind. And you will be happy, because they have nothing with which to repay you. Luke 14. 13, 14. On another occasion he encouraged a rich young ruler. Sell all the things you have and distribute to poor people, and you will have treasure in the heavens. And come be my follower. Luke 18. 22. The fact that this man was unwilling to part with his possessions to aid others showed that he had no real concern for the oppressed and thus did not have the qualities required for being a disciple of Jesus. Luke 18. 23. Jesus' encouragement to assist the poor was in line with what he himself had done. As God's Son in the heavens, he had everything. But though he was rich he became poor. As a poor man on earth, he was able to redeem the human race, making available the greatest of riches, that is, the prospect for his followers to become sons of God. 2 Cor 8. 9. Additionally, other great spiritual riches became available to them. Compare 2 Cor 6. 10. Read 2. 9. 3. 17, 18. Also, while on earth, Jesus personally took an interest in the materially poor. He and his apostles had a common fund from which they gave to needy Israelites. Mount 26. 9-11. Mr. 14. 5-7. Joe 12. 5-8. 13. 29. The same loving concern for the poor was manifested in later years by Christians as they provided material assistance for their poor brothers. Row 15. 26. G2. 10. But some did forget, making it necessary for the disciple James to reprimand them for bestowing favoritism on the rich and looking down on the poor. Just 2. 2-9. Of course, only those who were deserving received material assistance. By no means was laziness encouraged. As the Apostle Paul wrote to the Thessalonians, "If anyone does not want to work, neither let him eat." 2th 10. See beggar, begging. Gifts of mercy. Poplars heb. Ara middle.vim plural. The Hebrew name for this tree corresponds to the Arabic Arab, which continues to be used for the Euphrates poplar. Thus, although the poplar and willow are of the same family of trees, and both common to the Middle East, modern lexicographers favor the poplar tree Populus upratica in translation. See Kuhler and Baumgartner's Lexicon in Veteris Testamenti Libras, Leiden, 1958, p. 733. Brown, Driver, and Breeks Hebrew and English Lexicon of the Old Testament, 1980, p. 788. The New Westminster Dictionary of the Bible, edited by H. Geman, 1970, p. 998. The poplar tree is very common along the banks of the Euphrates, while the willow is comparatively rare there and thus fits well the reference at Psalm 137. 1, 2, which describes the weeping Jewish exiles as hanging their harps on the poplar trees. The small, crisp, heart-shaped leaves of the Euphrates poplar, also called aspen, are carried on flattened stems that hang obliquely from otex to acute muritra longo. Paratha 654 would appear to refer to the torrent Balni of Zidnu 21. 12. The 2. 13, which acted as the frontier boundary between Moab and Edom to the east. The torrent valley of Zid is generally identified with the Wadi el-Hassa, which flows into the east end of the Dead Sea. In its lower course it passes through a small plain that is somewhat swampy in places and could thus be a suitable place for poplars to have grown. Zid, torrent valley of Parathapomidal.Aratha. One of the 10 sons of Haman. As 9. 8, 10. Porch. In the Hebrew scriptures the word for porch, amiddle.lam or umiddle.lam, is not used in regard to an architectural portion of individual homes, private houses. Whether Israelite homes had a porch of some sort is difficult to determine. But the archaeological remains of some houses in Megiddo indicate that they were built around a courtyard and that one ground floor room served as an entrance vestibule. The Biblical Archaeologist, May 1968, pages 46, 48. In the scriptures a middle.lam is applied to 2 of the public buildings Solomon constructed, the front part of Solomon's temple, and to certain parts of the gateways and temple that Ezekiel was shown in vision. Porch of pillars. One of the official buildings Solomon constructed in the temple area sometime after he completed the temple was the Porch of Pillars. 1 Kai 7. 1. 6. Since mention of the Porch of Pillars is made between comments about the House of the Forest of Lebanon and comments about the Porch of the Throne, it is quite possible that the Porch of Pillars was S of the temple, and between these other two official buildings. Thus, one coming from the S might pass through or around the House of the Forest of Lebanon and then enter the Porch of Pillars, walking through it into the Porch of the Throne. The building was 50 cubits 22.3 meters, 72.9 feet long and 30 cubits 13.4 meters, 43.7 feet wide. Its very name suggests that it was made up of rows of impressive pillars. 1 Kings 7. 6 mentions another porch in front with pillars and a canopy. Perhaps this means that one first came to a porch having an extending canopy supported by pillars. Then this porch merged right into the Porch of Pillars proper. If the dimensions given apply just to the Porch of Pillars, then the size of the canopied portion is not given. This building may have served as a grand entranceway to the Porch of the Throne and as a place where the king conducted the ordinary business of the kingdom and received some visitors. Porch of the Throne. Another building that Solomon constructed after the temple was completed was the Porch of the Throne. 1 Kai 7. 1. 7. The Porch of Judgment referred to in the text seems to be synonymous with the Porch of the Throne. So the Porch of the Throne evidently was where Solomon placed his ornate ivory and gold throne and did judging. 1 Kai 10. 18-20. The entire description of this building is: He made the Porch of Judgment, and they covered it in with cedar wood from the floor to the rafters. 1 Kai 7. 7. The Masoretic text actually says, from floor to floor, leading some to believe that there was cedar from the floor of this building to the floor of the Porch of Pillars mentioned in the preceding verse. However, the Syriac Peshitta reads from floor to ceiling, and the Latin Vulgate says from floor to top. So, certain translators believe that the cedar was some sort of splendid paneling from the floor of the porch to its rafters or ceiling. In W. R. S. J. B. Although other architectural details are lacking, this would suggest a building not having open pillars on the side or sides, as may have been the case with the House of the Forest of Lebanon and the Porch of Pillars. Since the Porch of the Throne is listed right after the Porch of Pillars, it is possible that this latter building served as a grand entrance to the Porch of the Throne. A person coming from the S may have had to walk through the Porcho Textoi Acute Miritra Longo, Portment 655 Ezekiel's Temple Vision. Quite a number of porches are mentioned in the vision Ezekiel had of a temple sanctuary. The temple building itself had a porch in front toward the E, as did Solomon's temple. However, this porch was 20 cubits 10.4 m. 34 feet in length and 11 cubits 5.7 meters, 18.7 feet in width. The height is not stated. These measurements are based on the long cubit of about 51.8 centimeters 20.4 inches. CS 40. 5. FTN. This porch had pillars as well as side pillars, and there was a wood canopy, probably near the top. As 40. 48, 49. 41. 25, 26. Each of the three elaborate outer gateways approaching from the E, S, and then incorporated a porch with windows of narrowing frames. Apparently, one ascending the stairs into the gateway passed 3 guard chambers on each side and then, by crossing a threshold, came into the porch before entering the outer courtyard. As 40. 6-17. Each of the 3 inner gateways also had a porch, perhaps just as one ascended the steps and entered the gate. The porch in the gateway approached from the end contained 4 tables for slaughtering the whole burnt offering. As 40. 35-42. Porsus Festus. C. Festus. Porcupine Heb. Kip middle. Pod. A large rodent distinguished by its protective spines or quills. There is considerable dispute as to the exact meaning of the Hebrew word kip middle. Pod, variously rendered but nkj, da, bustadeni, hedgehogat, la, and porcupine s as, nw. Isra 14. 23. 34. 11. Zep 2. 14. In the light of Hebrew etymology, G.R. Driver rejects the rendering bitten and suggests that the Hebrew kip middle. Pod may apply both to the porcupine and to a bird. but he recommends rough busted as a likely translation for kit middle.pod in the above texts. Palestine Exploration Quarterly, London, 1955, p. 137. Cooler and Baumgartner prefer hedgehog at Isaiah 14. 23. 34. 11, but Shorty Bow at Zephaniah 2. 14. Lexicon in Veteris Testamenti Libros, Leiden, 1958, p. 845. That one Hebrew word may apply to two entirely different animals is illustrated by the term tin middle.shemeth, which denotes both a flying creature, the swan, and a swarming creature, the chameleon. Law 11. 18, 30. Despite the uncertainty, however, there is good basis for consistently translating kit middle.pod as either porcupine or hedgehog, rather than bittern. Both older and modern lexicons generally list hedgehog or porcupine as defining kipod in all cases. These renderings have the support of the Greek Septuagint and the Latin Vulgate, as well as of Hebrew etymology and related languages such as Aramaic, Arabic, and Ethiopic. On the basis of inferences drawn from Isaiah 14. 23 and Zephaniah 2. 14 regarding the desolation of Babylon and Nineveh, some raise the objection that the porcupine or the hedgehog could not be the animal intended, since this creature does not frequent reedy pools of water, nor can it sing or climb to the top of columns. However, according to Isaiah 14. 23, not the reedy pools but Babylon was to become the possession of porcupines. One explorer of Babylon's ruins reported finding quantities of porcupine quills. Similarly, the reference to a voice singing in the window at desolated Nineveh can apply to any bird that might perch in a deserted window or even to the sound of the wind and need not apply to the porcupine. Zep 2. 14 As to the porcupine spending the night among the pillar capitals, the top portion of the pillars, it must be remembered that the picture drawn is of a city in ruins. Hence, it is certainly possible that the pillars are here regarded as fallen to the ground. Porphyry middle.ri. A kind of stone, usually dark red, purple, or sometimes green, containing feldspar crystals. Together with marble and pearl, it was used as pavement in the Persian palace at Shushan in the days of King Ahasuerus. As 1. 6. Portent. Something that presages future situations or events. Also, a marvel. Biotextoi acute miritra longo, pot 656. Another use is oath sign to describe the same thing. Compare 2ch 32. 24 with 2 chi 20. 8, 9. A sign may serve as a guide or indicator for the present, as well as for the future, whereas a portent relates primarily to the future. The designating of something as a sign stresses that it has significance, whether for the present or the future. Its being called a portent stresses its significance as relating to the future. Thus, when referring to Joel 2. 30, which foretold portents plural of the Hebrew mo-middle.feth in the heavens and on the earth, the Apostle Peter spoke of portents plural of the gr. Duras in heaven above and signs plural of s-middle.meon on earth. Act 2. 14, 19 in the Christian Greek scriptures to dash ras is consistently used in combination with semeon sign, both terms being used in the plural form. Act 7. 36. 14. 3. 15. 12. 2 co 12. 12. Basically, teras refers to any act or thing exciting wonderment, hence it is properly translated wonders in some cases. Mount 24. 24. Joe 4. 48 Where the future is more clearly involved, portent is more appropriate. Serving as credentials that Jesus was God sent one with the powerful works and portents and signs that God did through him. Act 2. 22 The miraculous cures and resurrections he performed not only excited wonderment, but also portended what he would do on a greater scale in the future. Joe 6. 54. Compare Joe 1. 50, 51. 5. 20, 28. Some acts were portents of his future activity as God's high priest, forgiving sins and acting as judge. Mount 9. 2-8. Joe 5. 1-24 Others served as evidence of his future authority and power to act against Satan and his demons, abyssing them. Mount 12. 22-29. Lu 8. 27-33. Compare 20. 1-3. All such acts pointed forward to his messianic rule as anointed king of God's kingdom. Similarly, Jesus' disciples, as witnesses of his teachings and resurrection, were backed up by God with signs as well as portents and various powerful works. Heb 2. 3, 4. Act 2. 43. 5. 12 These gave evidence of God's dealings with the newly formed Christian congregation and portended his future use of that congregation to carry out his will and purpose. Compare Job 14. 12. As false prophets arose in Israel, so the foretold apostasy in the Christian congregation would produce a man of lawlessness whose presence would be evidenced by the operation of Satan with every powerful work and lying signs and portents. 2th 3-12 Thus, the evidence marshaled to support the apostate movement would not be weak or puny but would manifest Satan's might. The portents would be lying ones, however, either fraudulent on their face or deceptive as to the conclusions to which they would lead. Appearing to manifest God's benevolence and blessing, they would in reality divert persons from the source and path of life. Compare to Co 11. 3, 12-15. See miracles. Power, powerful works. Sign. Pot. See cooking, cooking utensils. Putapar pot middle. Far from Egyptian, a shortened form of Putapera. An Egyptian court official and chief of Pharaoh's bodyguard. He was Joseph's master for a time and, it appears, was a man of wealth. GE 37. 36. 39. For Potiphar purchased Joseph from the traveling Midianite merchants and, observing what a good servant Joseph was, eventually put him in charge of his whole house and field, which establishment Jehovah blessed on Joseph's account. GE 37. 36. 39. 1-6. Potiphar's wife was not as faithful to him as was his servant Joseph. She repeatedly endeavored to seduce Joseph and, one day when no other men were around, grabbed hold of him, but Joseph still refused and ran out. When Potiphar came home, he heard only his wife's frustrated barrage of false accusations. Potiphar angrily had Joseph thrown into prison. GE 39. 7-20. This prison seems to have been connected with Potiphar's house, or at least came under his jurisdiction as chief of the bodyguard. Thus, the record speaks of Pharaoh's Otextoi acute Muritra Longo, Potter 657 Nasser and Ephraim. GE 41. 45, 50. 46. 20 Potipharah was the priest, likely of the sun god Ra, officiating at Om, a center of Egyptian sun worship. In the Cairo Museum there is a stele, a funeral pillar, procured in 1935, that is on it the name Potiphar. Annales du Service des Antiquités de l'Égypte, Cairo, 1939, volume XXXIX, pages 273-276. Potsherd. A shard or broken piece of pottery. A fragment of earthenware. The Hebrew word cherez, though sometimes applying to an earthenware vessel or earthenware flask that is unbroken new 5. 17. 19. 1. Is possibly related to an Arabic word meaning scrape or scratch and can thus denote something rough, like a potsherd. When Satan struck Job with a malignant boil from the crown of his head to the sole of his foot, Job proceeded to take for himself a fragment of earthenware with which to scrape himself. Job 2. 7, 8 And concerning Leviathan it is stated, as pointed earthenware fragments are its underparts. Job 41. 1, 30. The Greek word ostramiddle.com appearing in LXX at Job 2. 8 was applied by the Greeks to potsherds on which they recorded votes. Archaeological discoveries. Potsherds, or pieces of pottery, are the most numerous items found by archaeologists during excavations of ancient sites. In the past, a broken piece of pottery might be used for such things as raking ashes or dipping water. ISA 30. 14. But especially were potsherds employed as inexpensive writing materials in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and elsewhere in the ancient Middle East. For instance, earthenware fragments were used for the well-known Lachish letters, which repeatedly contain the divine name, Jehovah, in tetragrammaton form E. In Egypt, archaeologists have found numerous pieces of limestone and earthenware fragments on which there appear drawings and inscriptions written in ink, generally in cursive hieroglyphic script, many said to date from about the 16th to the 11th centuries BCE, and some thus possibly reaching back to the days of Moses and of Israel's bondage in Egypt. Certain of these inscribed fragments consist of stories, poems, hymns, and the like, some of which were probably written as school lessons. Earthenware fragments apparently were used as writing material by people generally, much as memo pads and other pieces of paper are today, to record accounts, sales, marriage contracts, lawsuits, and many other matters. More than 60 ostraka inscribed with ink in Paleo-Hebrew script were discovered in the ruins of the royal palace in Samaria. They seem to be records of vineyard production, many possibly dating from the time of Jeroboam II. They give names of places and persons, the latter including some compound forms involving the use of the names Baal, El, and Jehovah. Greek ostraka found in Egypt include various types of documents, but principally tax receipts. They give some insight into the Greek language as spoken by the common people of that land during Ptolemaic, Roman, and Byzantine times, and so they are of some use in studies of the coin used by writers of the Christian Greek scriptures. 20 Greek ostraka found in Upper Egypt were inscribed with portions of the four Gospels, these probably dating from the 7th century CE, used in illustrations. Potsherds are also used with figurative associations in the scriptures. David, distressed and surrounded by enemies, said in a psalm prophetic of the Messiah's sufferings, "My power has dried up just like a fragment of earthenware." PS 22. 11-15 As articles made of clay were baked, they would become very dry, and their brittleness became evident when a vessel was reduced to fragments. Glazing methods were evidently common in King Solomon's day, for Proverbs 26:23 states, "As a silver glazing overlaid upon a fragment of earthenware are fervent lips along with a bad heart." Like silver glazing that would hide the earthenware it covered, fervent lips could owe text to a acute muritra longo. Potter's Field 658 ke middle. Mois comes from a root meaning mix, perhaps referring to the need to mix water with the soil or clay to prepare it for use. Since very early times, potters have fashioned clay into vessels and baked these, thus producing hardened utensils that would not soften when wet. The potter might work alone, but he sometimes had assistants, frequently apprentices. Among the Hebrews, a group of royal potters seems to have existed at one time. 1 ch. 4. 21-23. A typical method of making pottery began with such steps as washing the clay and purifying it of foreign matter, weathering it, and trampling the moistened clay by foot to make it pasty and malleable. Isra 41. 25 Next the clay was kneaded by hand and then placed on the potter's wheel. The early potter's wheel was generally made of stone, though sometimes of wood, and was, basically, a flat disc centered on a vertical axle and made to rotate horizontally. Heavy material at its edge gave the disc stability and momentum as it was turned by hand. The later addition of a larger, heavy lower wheel on the same shaft as the top wheel and also revolving horizontally enabled the seated potter to rotate the wheels by foot. Having thrown or placed the shapeless clay on the wheel, the potter used his hands to form a vessel as the wheel was turned. 18. 3. For the utensil might next be dried somewhat in the sun and again put on the wheel, where the potter might employ pebbles, shells, or some implement to smooth and burnish it and to impart a design to its surface. Methods varied, but he could give it a rope pattern, for instance, by pressing a twisted cord against the still moist article. Vessels were often painted decoratively. Others were glazed PR 26. 23 and then fired, or baked, in the nearby pottery kiln. Or, colored slip potters' clay in a semi-liquid state might be applied for decorative purposes, after which the article was again fired in the kiln. The potter made articles ranging from large jars for 2 to lamps, ovens, and toys such as dolls and animal figures. Bowls, cups, flasks, and other vessels were among his products. The 15. 12. 2 to 17. 28. J 19. 1. Lu 22. 10. He also produced cooking pots and some griddles. Earthenware items were sometimes stamped to show where they were made. The potter frequently stamped his own trademark on a pot handle. Sometimes the potter used an open mold, into which the clay was pressed to pick up details. In later times lamps were often made in that way, in two pieces that were joined when the clay had dried to about a leathery hardness. Occasionally things were molded by hand without using the wheel. Usually, however, the potter used the wheel. Broken pieces of pottery are often discovered at archaeological sites, sometimes in great numbers. See potsherd. The kinds of pottery found are viewed by archaeologists as aids in identifying different cultures as well as in estimating the period of occupation represented by various layers at such sites. They have also endeavored to estimate population density of a particular place in ancient times on the basis of the quantity of such fragments discovered there. The potter's authority over the clay is used illustratively to show Jehovah's sovereignty over individuals and nations. Isra 29. 15, 16. 64. A to God the house of Israel was as the clay in the hand of the potter, he being the great potter. Jer 18. 1-10 Man is in no position to contend with God, just as clay would not be expected to challenge the one shaping it. Isra 45. 9 As an earthenware vessel can be smashed, so Jehovah can bring devastating calamity upon a people in punishment for wrongdoing. Jer 19. 1-11. Concerning the Messianic king's exercise of God-given authority against the nations, it was foretold. You will break them with an iron scepter, as though a potter's vessel you will dash them to pieces. PS2. 9. Compared R2. 44. O textoi acute miritra longo, powerful works 659 seems probable if the traditional site is correct. It would be near the gate of the potsherds or gate of the potters, according to J. Simons in his footnote in Jerusalem in the Old Testament, Leiden, 1952, p. 230. Gate of the ash heaps in Nehemiah, mentioned in Jeremiah 19. 1, 2. Compare Jer 18. 2. The necessary raw material, clay, was available in the vicinity. Also, making pottery required a good water supply, and the site was close to the spring at Enrogel and the pool of Siloam as well as near such water as might be in the Hinnom Valley in the winter. Pound gr. Litra. A weight mentioned only at John 12. 3 ftn and 19. 39 ftn. The Greek term is usually equated with the Roman pound lat. Libra. Thus it was about 327 grams, 11.5 oz. Some versions render the Greek word na as pound lu 19. 18, kj, di, jb, we, but it is more appropriately rendered mina. Da, fn, nw, ro whereas pound is used in the Bible just as a weight or measurement, mina is a monetary weight indicating a specific value of gold or silver. Powerful works. Power is the ability to perform acts, the capacity to accomplish things, to do work. Also, authority or influence as a result of endowments or position. The Hebrew word koach is translated power. Ra, mightiness. And oz, strength. The Greek di-na-mis is translated both power and powerful works, as the context makes appropriate. At the close of the sixth creative day, God began resting from all his work that he had created for the purpose of making. Ge 2. 3 He rested from these creative works, but his power has since not become dormant or remained quiescent. Over 4,000 years after the completion of earthly creation, his son stated, "My Father has kept working until now, and I keep working." Job 5. 17 Not only as regards the spirit realm has Jehovah been active. The Bible record pulsates with his expressions of power and his mighty acts toward humankind. Though at times he has kept quiet. Exercising self-control, whenever his due time came to act he has taken vigorous action with full might. Isra 42. 13, 14. Compare PS 80. 2. Isra 63. 15. Work indicates purposeful activity. Jehovah's acts are not isolated, unrelated, are erratic expressions of energy but are coordinated, purposeful acts with a definite end in view. Although his power sustains the universe and the living creatures in it. PS 136. 25. 148. 2-6. Mount 5.